Your mother should be disgraced that she brought you into this world. She needs to take you out of it.
Basically throw her out like garbage.
In the parking lot, a struck her in the head, and she died from a single shot.
That brings the total to 146 years to life.
In November 2021, self-claimed Hollywood producer David Brian Pierce was captured on surveillance video leaving 2 unconscious women at separate Los Angeles hospitals. The women, model Christy Giles and her friend Hilda Markella Cabrales Arzola, had spent the night at parties before going to Pierce's Beverly Hills apartment, where prosecutors say he gave them dangerous drugs. Giles died within hours, and Cabrales Arzola passed away days later. As detectives dug deeper, several other women came forward, accusing Pierce of drugging and assaulting them in incidents that stretched back more than a decade. Their testimonies helped investigators build a broader case, showing a long pattern of predatory behavior. The case went to trial in 2025, and a jury found Pierce guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of sexual assault.
Basically throw her out like garbage. Nobody protected my daughter from him. He was a wolf that hunted in the general population. So now let him be hunted by the wolf.
In October 2025, during sentencing, survivors and family members described the lasting harm he caused. Even Pierce's own sister addressed the court.
You are indeed a con artist, a pathological liar, a predator, a thief, and a self-serving manipulator. I stand here today to beg, not ask but beg, that you be removed from society for the rest of your life.
The judge noted Pierce showed no genuine remorse.
That brings the total to 146 years to life. These are horrific acts, just horrific. And honestly, not once have I seen a genuine issuance of some sort of remorse.
The judge imposed one of the longest sentences possible, 146 years to life in prison. The ruling ensures Pierce will remain behind bars permanently. For families and survivors, the conclusion of the case brought a measure of closure after years of heartbreak, and prosecutors called the decision a significant moment of justice. In February 2023, Sayreville councilwoman and pastor Eunice Dwumfor was sitting inside her car outside her home when she was suddenly shot. Neighbors called 911, and police arrived within minutes, but despite their efforts, she did not survive. Her death stunned her family, her church community, and the town she served. For months, investigators worked to uncover who was responsible. Digital evidence, travel records, and surveillance footage eventually led authorities to a man named Rashid Ali Bynum, who had known Eunice through her former church. He was arrested 4 months after the shooting and brought back to New Jersey to face charges. In 2025, after a full trial, a jury found Bynum guilty of murder and multiple weapons offenses.
15 rounds at point-blank range into a driver's side window of a completely defenseless woman who had nowhere to run and nowhere to hide because she was seatbelted into her driver's seat in her car.
When the sentencing day arrived, Eunice's family, friends, and church members packed the courtroom, many wearing shirts printed with her picture.
Your mother should be disgraced that she brought you into this world. She needs to take you out of it. Since you want to look around, look at me when I talk to you.
I met my wife, Pastor Eunice. I call her my angel. I call her my love. I call her my heartbeat.
They shared emotional statements about the impact of losing someone who had been a mother, sister, wife, and spiritual leader.
The defendant is committed to the custody of the Commissioner of the Department of Corrections for life.
Judge Joseph Paone ultimately sentenced him to life in prison, with nearly 64 years required before he can seek parole. Though the case brought justice for Eunice's loved ones, one question remained unanswered: the motive, which Bynum never explained. In 2022, Fresno police responded to a heartbreaking scene inside a family home. 18-year-old Yaneli Solorio Rivera and her newborn daughter were found shot and killed. Investigators quickly identified Yaneli's older sister, Yareli Solorio Rivera, and Yareli's boyfriend, Martin Arroyo Morales, as the primary suspects. Detectives said the pair eventually confessed and even helped locate the firearm used in the crime.
Confessed to the crime and led detectives to the whereabouts of the murder weapon.
Through the investigation, prosecutors alleged the motive was rooted in growing tension and jealousy within the family, though the defense later claimed Urelli acted out of fear and emotional instability.
And she's not such an evil, cold killer. This was done out of love for her children, for the safety of her children.
Does your client have any remorse for what happened?
Yes, she has remorse. She's very sorry. She knows she could have done better.
Over the next 3 years, the case moved slowly through the courts. Arroyo Morales accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 22 years for voluntary manslaughter.
I would have to say that this is a complete family tragedy. She made a deal with the state, and the court's going to follow through with that state, and she avoided a potential death penalty.
Urelli chose to avoid a potential death penalty trial by accepting a plea agreement of her own.
I come here to accompany my daughter today. I believe that you are making the wrong decision, you and the DA, when they want to send my daughter for life to jail when he is the one guilty of all of this.
During the hearing, Urelli's father appeared in court to support her, while no one was present to speak on behalf of the victims. In October 2025, a judge sentenced her to 2 life sentences, one for her sister and one for the infant. In January 2019, 88-year-old Yikoi Huang, known in her community as Grandma Huang, left her home in San Francisco's Visitation Valley for her regular morning walk. Around the same time, investigators say a young man named Keontae Gathron was already moving through the neighborhood during a spree of robberies, carjackings, and break-ins targeting vulnerable residents. That morning, Huang was discovered seriously injured near a playground across from her home. She was taken to the hospital and continued receiving care for months, but her condition never fully improved. Nearly a year later, she passed away from the injuries she suffered that day. As detectives pieced together the case, they linked Gathron to Huang's assault and to several other crimes involving all victims. He was eventually charged with murder, robbery, burglary, carjacking, and multiple counts of elder and child endangerment.
We also tied Mr. Gathron to a number of incidents involving carjackings and robberies that happened in the weeks leading up to Ms. Wang's murder and also the weeks following, including armed robberies. And so, yes, the jury has come back finding him guilty of multiple incidents.
When the case went to trial in 2025, Gathron chose to represent himself and denied every accusation, offering unusual explanations for the evidence. After weeks of testimony and video analysis, a jury found him guilty on all major charges, including first-degree murder.
The message, I think, we hope that this case, my grandma's case, will bring the message to the community. I hope that this case closure will bring out a good message to the community and all the people, the local community or the local family here to bring up a safer environment that we showed up as Asians and as other minorities as well.
Huang's family said the verdict brought a sense of closure, hoping it would help restore safety and trust within their community.
To me, the guilty verdict it's a moment of truth, it's long overdue, and it validates what our community has been fighting for.
Asian American advocacy groups also welcomed the decision, saying it finally delivered accountability after years of waiting. Gathron now faces a life sentence at his upcoming hearing. In February 2025, authorities in Backcliff, Texas discovered 68-year-old Tammy King dead in her home after family members couldn't reach her. Police immediately noticed signs of a break-in, missing valuables, and evidence that suggested the crime was planned rather than random. Investigators soon focused on two people: Tammy's granddaughter, Tara King, and Tara's boyfriend, 18-year-old Uriah Lee Urick Jr. Over the next several days, detectives pieced together messages and location data showing the pair discussing stealing from Tammy and talking about ways to get access to her house. 4 days after the killing, Urick and Tara were located in Laredo while attempting to flee the state. A third person, suspected of helping them leave the area, was also detained. As the case moved forward, prosecutors built their argument around digital conversations, stolen property, and travel records that tied Urick directly to the plan and the aftermath. Tara's trial was scheduled for a later date, making Urick the first to face a jury. In November 2025, after several days of testimony, the case was handed to jurors.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Uriah Lee Urick Jr., guilty of the felony offense of capital murder as charged in the indictment. Signed by the court president of the jury.
Mr. Agnew, would you like to have a jury poll?
So,
All right, you may be seated. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, your service is complete. I'm going to ask you to walk back with Deputy Flynn, and I'll visit you in a minute.
all right.
On November 7th, following just over 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Uriah Urick guilty of capital murder and related charges, including credit card abuse. Under Texas law, that verdict carries an automatic sentence, and the judge ordered life in prison without the possibility of parole. In August 2022, 57-year-old Matthew Paul and his longtime girlfriend, Stephanie Pavlans, were seen together on surveillance video as she left her apartment and got into his truck. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. Weeks later, on September 9th, a construction worker found her remains in a wooded area in Delafield, Wisconsin. The body was too decomposed for a medical examiner to determine an exact cause of death, and no DNA or eyewitness evidence directly tied anyone to what happened. Investigators instead relied on a timeline built from digital and physical clues, including cell phone data showing both Paul's and Pavlan's phones in the same area the morning she disappeared, and footage of Paul later returning home carrying her purse and water bottle. Prosecutors also presented journal entries and photos documenting past emotional and physical abuse, arguing that Pavlans had planned to end the relationship and that this contributed to what unfolded. The trial took place 3 years later and lasted 8 days. Despite the largely circumstantial nature of the case, the jury needed just over an hour to reach a verdict. On November 4th, 2025, they found Paul guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and hiding a corpse.
Follows, we, the jury, find the defendant, Matthew E. Paul, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information.
I'm feeling a great sense of relief. Very difficult case for them to have to listen to. Obviously, as we presented during the trial, they didn't have any clue this was going on with their daughter.
A week later, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of release, along with additional time for concealing the body. For Pavlan's family, the verdict brought relief after years of uncertainty, and the court emphasized the seriousness of domestic violence and the importance of recognizing red flags before a situation turns tragic. In March 2025, 59-year-old Cindiana Santangelo arranged what she believed would be a cosmetic enhancement procedure at her Malibu home. The procedures were carried out by Libby Adam, a woman who was not licensed to perform any medical treatments. Soon after the session, Santangelo went into medical distress and later passed away. Doctors determined the cause to be complications from the unapproved material used in the procedure. The case immediately drew attention, especially when investigators learned that Adame had previously been convicted in another fatal cosmetic incident back in 2019, but had continued offering the same illegal services. When Adame went to trial in 2025, prosecutors argued that she knowingly performed a risky, unlicensed procedure and misrepresented her qualifications.
Nobody ever identifies Libby as being the injector in this case.
The evidence supports that inference that she did indeed perform the injection.
The jury found her guilty of second-degree murder and practicing medicine without a license.
We've had our whole life turned upside down. And I'll never have my best friend and wife again.
I just don't think someone that has no regard for human life or anything like that should be allowed back on the street, because clearly this is something that's happened multiple times.
During sentencing, Santangelo's family spoke through tears, asking the court to impose the maximum penalty.
The defendant's motion for a new trial is denied.
Adam showed little visible reaction as the judge denied her request for a new trial and ruled that the evidence clearly showed she conducted the procedures. She was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison, bringing the case to a close and serving as a reminder of the dangers posed by underground cosmetic procedures. Mark Mitchell, a 64-year-old man, was riding his motorized bicycle home along South Ridge Road on a November night in 2024. At the same time, Justin Hanasowski was driving while impaired. He briefly looked down at his dashboard, veered off course, and struck Mitchell from behind. Instead of stopping to check what happened, he continued driving. Witnesses who saw the crash followed him and alerted authorities. Mitchell was taken to the hospital but did not survive his injuries, and the investigation quickly identified Hanusowski as the driver responsible. In the months that followed, Hanusowski was charged and later pleaded guilty to impaired driving, attempted aggravated vehicular homicide, and failing to stop after the accident.
Here we are again, after the defendant again made the conscious choice to drink and drive.
This was an accident waiting to happen just on the dangerous circumstances created by riding a bike at night on this particular road that was not well lit.
During sentencing, his attorney attempted to argue that the dark road conditions played a role, but the judge rejected that explanation.
There came a point where you were advised that you didn't strike a mailbox, you struck a person, and you continued to leave the scene. That makes the conduct here more serious.
The judge emphasized that Hanusowski had been told he hit a person, yet still left the scene. In court, he apologized to the victim's family. He was ultimately sentenced to 42 months in prison, along with losing his driving privileges, bringing the case to a close. In August 2023, Henderson police found Jonathan Willett dead inside his home, leading investigators to focus on Devin Michaels, the mother of his 2 daughters, who also went by multiple aliases from her past work. Detectives uncovered a complicated family history. Michaels had entered a relationship with Willett's adult son, Devier, when he was 19, and the two later married. This revelation, which Jonathan had only learned about shortly before his death, created significant tension in the household. During the investigation, police located Jonathan's personal items, including his car keys and wallet, inside Michael's bedroom. Michaels was eventually arrested and initially pleaded guilty in 2024, but later withdrew her plea and requested a full jury trial. As the 2025 trial unfolded, Michael's defense attempted to shift suspicion onto Devier, suggesting he resented his father and may have been involved. Devier took the stand and denied participating in the crime, explaining that he had been drinking heavily at the time and remembered little, but was certain he had no role in what happened.
Did you kill your father?
No, sir.
Did you have any involvement in your father?
No, sir.
Did you have any involvement in what happened to his body after?
No, sir.
Lied to him about the relationship that you have with your wife, and you've lied to him about the living arrangement where you're getting kicked out by your father, correct? He's moving you out.
Yes, sir, because I didn't know what exactly had happened.
Prosecutors emphasized that there was no digital or physical evidence connecting him to the case, while police testified about their extensive search efforts, noting that some key evidence was never recovered. Devier said he has cut contact with Michael since her arrest and intends to divorce her. The trial remains ongoing, with more witness testimony expected in the coming days. In late October 2025, deputies in Rancho Cucamonga responded to a domestic violence call at an apartment complex. When 28-year-old Deputy Andrew Nunez arrived, investigators say the suspect, 47-year-old Angelo Jose Saldivar, opened fire, leaving the deputy fatally wounded. Saldivar then fled on a motorcycle, leading officers on a dangerous chase along the 210 freeway. The pursuit ended when an off-duty deputy in an unmarked vehicle intervened, causing Saldivar to crash near Upland. He was taken into custody with visible injuries and later transferred to a hospital before being moved to jail. Across California, flags were lowered, and the community held vigils to honor Deputy Nunez, who left behind a pregnant wife and a daughter. On November 3rd, prosecutors filed 10 felony charges against Saldivar, including murder with special circumstances for killing a peace officer, attempted kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault with a deadly weapon, firearm enhancements, and felony evading. The next day, Saldivar appeared in court for the first time, seated in a wheelchair and wearing a back brace. Once medically cleared, he entered a not guilty plea to all charges. He is being held without bail and is scheduled to return for a preliminary hearing. If convicted, Saldivar could face life in prison without parole. Meanwhile, funeral preparations for Deputy Nunez continue as the department and community grieve the loss of a young officer described as dedicated, calm under pressure, and deeply committed to his family. In 2023, emergency responders in Detroit were called to the home of Alicia Renee Holloman after her son, Deshaun Williams, was found in severe medical distress. He was rushed to the hospital, but doctors were unable to save him. His injuries raised immediate concerns, and police opened an investigation into how a boy had become so critically hurt. Very quickly, attention turned to the two adults living with him, his mother, Holloman, and her boyfriend, Avian Traylor. According to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, evidence suggested Deshaun had experienced ongoing abuse in the household, and detectives concluded that the adults in the home had repeatedly failed to protect him. Both Holloman and Traylor were arrested and charged with homicide-related offenses, and the case moved into the Michigan court system, where it would remain for nearly 2 years as lawyers, investigators, and medical experts prepared their positions. During pretrial hearings, the court reviewed medical findings, recorded statements, and witness testimony. Prosecutors described Deshaun as a boy who had endured long-term mistreatment, while defense attorneys debated plea options, attorney changes, and trial strategy. As the trial date approached in 2025, both defendants ultimately chose to plead guilty rather than face a jury. In court filings, Traylor attempted at one point to withdraw his plea, claiming he felt pressured and misunderstood the consequences, but the judge denied the motion after reviewing the record and noting that Traylor had given his plea voluntarily and under oath. At sentencing, Deshaun's family delivered heartbreaking statements, describing him as a joyful, loving, and expressing the deep grief the family continued to feel.
You can direct your comments to me, okay?
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here. Take your time.
Okay. Words cannot explain the pain, grief, anxiety, heartbreak you have caused my family. This is by far the worst thing we had to endure as a family. We tried countless times to wrap our minds around what kind of human beings could commit such heinous crime on a 7-year-old innocent little boy full of life, laughter, love, and joy. Dwayne Williams did not deserve to be treated so badly. Honestly, there is no words to explain in detail the sick, disgusting, demonic, ritual-like crime you committed. There is no logical explanation for your behavior other than your pure evil. This kind of wicked behavior just did not happen overnight, or even the few years you was dating my sister Alicia. This kind of evil was embedded in you at a young age. It all starts at home. It is clear that your mom and father failed you. You gave red flags early on. They ignored them. Abused child, rejected child, unloved child, SSA child, abandoned child. They did it to you, so you did it to him. You decided not to heal, but to kill an innocent child, not a grown man that could defend himself, but a 7-year-old child. What a coward. The harsh reality is that your mom gave birth to a demon. You took the plea deal, which tells me that you are guilty. You acknowledge that you are. And I can say what I think you deserve, but none of that matters because the vengeance is the Lord's. And I ask that God have mercy on your soul.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Thank you.
His aunt, speaking on behalf of the family, told the court that the loss had shattered them, and the judge later said the case was one of the most distressing he had seen in nearly 2 decades of working in criminal law. He noted that while Holloman may have been afraid of her boyfriend, her failure to protect her son and her attempts to hide what happened contributed significantly to Deshaun's suffering. The judge said the audio and video evidence presented during pretrial proceedings was the worst he had encountered in his career.
Ms. Holloman said is accurate, and frankly a parent's, aunts, uncles, grandparents' worst nightmare. This is generally the time, Judge, where my client apologizes for what he did. And this by no means is any disrespect to the young man's family or to this court. You just heard me argue a motion, and quite frankly, depending upon what my client's family has to say, once we discuss the matter, there may be legal issues that continue or not. So I don't think, I'll try to be a good lawyer. And so if it appears as if my client was not apologetic, was not sympathetic, that's not the case at all, and I'll have to take the blame for that. Otherwise, as I've indicated, everything seems accurate. You've read the pre-sentence investigation report. There's really no reason to belabor a point. I'll apologize. This is something that never should have happened. And hopefully nobody in that family or anybody else's family will have to go through it again. Thanks for hearing me out, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Traylor, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, sir.
Anything on behalf of Ms. Holloman, Ms. Vernulik? And Ms. Holloman, if you can stand up, Ms. Holloman, but obviously Ms. Vernulik, you can stay there.
I'm going to stand on the client.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that you're comfortable.
Your Honor.
Do you want to stand there?
I'll stand here.
Okay.
Your Honor, from the moment I met Ms. Holloman, she has presented herself to me as a woman in grief, fear, disbelief, and also her own guilt. Her failure to protect her child, which is one of the things that is most natural to most, is something that she is living with daily and suffers with herself. The fact that she did not stop what happened to her child is something that she expresses remorse and guilt upon every time that I've had the opportunity. And I've met with Ms. Holloman on a number of occasions. Ms. Holloman has, at every single moment, expressed remorse for what happened to her son, and also acceptance of the fact that she allowed her fear from what was also being done to her fail to protect her child. She does not stand here as someone who is asking the court to take any excuses from her. She does not stand here to make any excuses on behalf of what happened. But she was also someone that was ready to finally stand up to her abuser for her child, giving him the last bit of rest that she believed that she could, which was to testify for him. Now, she does not say that to mitigate or lessen her failure to protect him, but as far as a way of trying to help her son get the justice that he deserved, and that was the step that she was going to take. And even in doing that and preparing for that, she was fearful to even testify, but she was going to do it, even knowing that he's in custody as well. She has been fearful. Your Honor, she entered and has accepted this plea offer because she understands that as her role as a parent, she failed to protect Sean. And that is something that she's living with daily and will continue to live with for the rest of her life. We do ask the court to accept the plea agreement and an offer that was made in this case and sentence her accordingly to the offer that was accepted. It is within the guideline range. It does not exceed the guidelines, even though it is near the higher end. The guideline max was 22 years. The plea offer in this case is 20, and we ask that the court accept that along with the 711 days of jail credit.
Thank you, Ms. Vernulik. Ms. Holloman, is there anything you'd like to say? Okay, thank you. I will indicate to both defendants that you may file an application for leave to appeal your conviction and sentence. If you cannot afford to hire an attorney, the court will appoint an attorney and furnish the attorney with the transcripts and file necessary for you to handle your appeal. Your request for an attorney must be made within 42 days. With regards to credit time, as stated, Mr. Traylor is going to have 710 days credit for the time that he has served in the Wayne County Jail. Ms. Holloman is going to have 711 days credit for the time that she has served in the Wayne County Jail. With regards to costs and fees, Mr. Traylor will have $1,300 in court costs, $68 in state costs, $130 in crime victims assessment fee. There will be no verbal, electronic, written or electronic or physical contact with Alicia Holloman or the family of Deshaun Williams in any way. With regards to Ms. Holloman, there will be $400 in attorney fees, $68 in state costs, $1,300 in court costs, and $130 in a crime victims assessment. With regards to Mr. Traylor's probation case, this is case 22-001978. He will be closed out of probation with credit for 710 days served, and it will be without improvement. HIDA will be revoked on that case as well. The case has been a very difficult case for everybody involved. Deshaun Williams is 7 years old. He died of blunt force trauma to his head and his pelvis. Multiple force blows to his head and to his pelvis. Were on his leg. Hot water was poured over him. He was tortured. Now, with regards to Ms. Holloman, she facilitated this and then lied to police about what happened. Mr. Traylor tried to first blame it on somebody else and lied to police as well. This is a horrible case for many reasons, but I actually was able to hear a lot of the evidence because of pretrial motions. You can hear Deshaun crying for his life on the recording. Neither of these defendants are victims in any way with regards to this case as far as this court's concerned. With regards to Ms. Holloman, and I do have a lot of respect for all of the attorneys, Ms. Franulik, Mr. Sharp, Ms. Ripley, but for her actions, Deshaun would never have been tortured in the way that he was tortured. This is the worst case that I've seen in my time as a judge, which is 9 years now. Quite frankly, I've been involved in criminal law for 18 years. This is the worst case that I've seen. And sometimes, people that work in this courthouse, whether it be defense attorneys or prosecutors, judges, deputies, I always worry. I hope never to be desensitized to any violence because we see it on a daily basis. We hope never to be that way. And I'm sure everyone involved in this case will remember this for the rest of their life. And I'm glad to say that that did not happen to me. Everybody was moved by the horror that we saw on that video and that audio. It was one of the worst things, probably the worst thing I've ever seen, I've ever heard. And what I can indicate as well, something that I don't always, I almost never say this at a time of sentencing. But based on what I have said so far, based on how horrible of a case this was, based on what Deshaun, a 7-year-old innocent boy, had to suffer, I hope that Ms. Holloman, and I hope the parole board hears this and looks back on this 20 years from now for Ms. Holloman and 28 years from now with regards to Mr. Traylor. Mr. Traylor deserves to spend 60 years in prison. Ms. Holloman deserves to spend 40 years in prison for what they did to Deshaun. I will adopt the sentence agreement in this case, and with regards to Ms. Holloman, sentence her to 20 to 40 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, and with regards to Mr. Traylor, sentence him to 40 to 60 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. Thank you, everyone.
You sentenced him to what?
40 to 60 years. I'm sorry, 28 to 60 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. I apologize. I misread something. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sorry, Mr. Sharp. I was looking at the... You can probably figure out. I was looking at the...
In accordance with the plea agreements, Alicia Holloman was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, while Avian Trailer received a sentence of 28 to 60 years, along with jail time credit for the period both had already served while awaiting trial. In the months before May 7, 2023, tensions were growing inside the Maplewood Commons apartment complex in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. According to investigators, a conflict involving boys living in the area had begun escalating, and surveillance later showed that 3 of them, Paris Larry Jr., Antonio Johnston, and Tristan Richmond, were frequently together in the building's common hallway. Court records also note that just days before the shooting, Larry appeared in a social media live stream where he displayed a gold chain and challenged others with phrases like, "Come and snatch it," hinting at rising hostility. On the evening of May 7th, life at the complex appeared normal. A family birthday gathering was taking place in the parking lot. Residents were stepping outside to throw out trash. 18-year-old Tatiana Zek was standing outside with friends. In an upper floor apartment across the courtyard, a short time later, the calm shifted.
Laying out what I expect you'll hear from some of the witnesses. And what you're going to hear about is from May 7th of 2023, a little bit before 7 p.m. at the Maplewood Commons, which is the intersection of Martin Avenue and Pioneer Road in the city of Fond du Lac. Right across the street from that, Jesus Little Lamb Child Care, Tyson Middle School, right nearby. And what you're going to hear is 14 gunshots. You're going to hear about the impact of those 14 gunshots. You're going to hear from Fond du Lac County Medical Examiner Adam Kovac that Tatiana Zek, 18 years old, was in, and you'll see a video of this as well, in the parking lot of the Maplewood Commons between 2 of the buildings with a group, and a bullet struck her in the head, and she died from a single gunshot wound. You're going to hear about another individual named Javier, who was across the way in an upper apartment, in his apartment, and a bullet hit him in the back. You're going to hear about him getting to the hospital and getting care and the injuries he suffered. You're going to hear that his son, Emmanuel, was on the first floor of that apartment, and that another apparent bullet came through and got so close that it was either the heat that burned his leg or grazed him, but he didn't need medical care. And you're going to hear about Keyshawn Johnson, who was in that group of people with Tatiana. You're going to see him in the video as well, moving closer to the building on the opposite side of where Javier and Emmanuel were. And you're going to see and hear from witnesses that he was shot as well in the upper back area, almost like where straps of a backpack on the backside. And that he needed medical care as well, but he was able to flee from the scene. You're going to also hear that Keyshawn fired once back at those that were shooting at him. And you're going to hear evidence about where the shooting came from. So I said Keyshawn once. You're going to hear testimony about a bullet casing, and then there's 13 other rounds. And you're going to hear testimony about those rounds as well. On the video, you'll actually see an individual named Antonio Johnston come out. So Maplewood Commons, the apartments, they have these common hallways in there. There's, I think, 2 of them in each of the buildings, and they can go out on either side of the building. And so there's just a door that swings open, glass door, and you're going to hear and see the testimony of Antonio coming out of that swinging door from that hallway area. You're going to hear testimony that another individual named Tristan Richmond was in that hallway. You'll also hear that the defendant, Paris Larry, was also in that hallway. And you'll actually see Antonio Johnston, and I believe you'll hear him testify in this trial, seeing him pulling that gun out down at his side, seeing him raising that gun, and then in the video, consistent with somebody shooting at the direction of Keyshawn Johnson. which some of the witnesses, I believe, are going to testify and talk to you about Keyshawn being the intended target of that shooting. And you're going to hear that 2 firearms were recovered in a garbage can at Tyson Middle School on the north side or back side of the school. You're going to see surveillance footage that will put the defendant as well as Antonio Johnston and Tristan Richmond in that area. You're going to hear from Wisconsin Crime Lab analysts that of the 2 firearms that were recovered, one of them was a Glock gun. It had DNA consistent with Antonio Johnston's DNA on it. And you're going to hear from another crime lab analyst that there were 10 bullet casings that were found that matched that Glock firearm that had DNA consistent with Antonio Johnston. So that leaves 3 casings left. You're also going to hear in that same garbage can there was a Bursa handgun that was found, and that the DNA from the analysis by the crime lab found that to be consistent with the DNA of the defendant, Paris Larry. And you're going to hear that those other 3 casings, the crime lab found to be consistent with being fired from that Bursa handgun that had the DNA consistent with Paris Larry. You're going to hear testimony from some of the witnesses, and I believe, as I said, Antonio Johnston. You're going to see the video, and that Antonio Johnston was the one to fire first, and that Paris Larry fired almost instantly after Antonio Johnston began shooting. And what you'll hear is 2 of the casings from the Bursa handgun that was consistent with Paris Larry's DNA on it were in the hallway of that Maple Woods the apartment area where Antonio Johnston had walked out, where Tristan Richmond and Paris Larry were. You're going to see footage then of these individuals on the back side or north side of this building at Maplewood Commons running out the backside. And then you're going to continue to see some video footage, and we have 1 more bullet casing that is found in that area as they're running, and that was from the Bursa handgun that had the DNA consistent with Paris Larry that was fired as he was running from the scene. You're then going to continue to see footage from Jesus Little Lamb that has cameras pointing towards the Tyson Middle School, and you'll see these individuals around different parts of the middle school, around the backside where the garbage can is, where the firearms were ultimately found by now State Trooper Viss, and then ultimately collected by Detective Henning with the City of Fond du Lac Police Department. And so you're going to then hear these Antonio Johnston and Paris Larry essentially fled the scene. Antonio Johnston, I expect, talk to you about the length of time it took for him when he was ultimately taken into custody. And you're going to hear that the defendant, Paris Larry, at some point turned himself in to law enforcement. Now, what led up to this shooting? You're going to hear that as I've talked about, the building that would essentially be on the north side of the Maplewood Commons complex, that's where Antonio Johnston and Paris Larry were when the shooting happened. The building directly across from that is where a family was having a barbecue to celebrate a birthday. They had some other individuals were coming over, and some of them were taking trash out from that to a dumpster. So if the building would be up here, they were walking over to the dumpster, dropping the trash off, and then walking back towards the apartment where the barbecue was happening. And so you're going to hear some of the individuals that were present in that group of people, Keyshawn Johnson, Tatiana Zek. You're going to hear from Namarian Stewart. You're going to hear from Michaela Stewart and D. Ray Brown, who were all in this group at the time that shooting happened in the parking lot at Maplewood Commons. Some of the things as far as the presentation of the trial that I expect you're going to see, you're going to see a bit of an initial response from Officer Royston. Prior to Officer Royston responding to Maplewood Commons, you're going to hear him testify about contact that he had with Tristan Richmond, Antonio Johnston, and the defendant near the Buttermilk Creek area, probably within about an hour of the shooting, where there was somebody had called in that they thought there might be somebody with a firearm in that area. And what you'll see in some of the videos as Paris Larry, the defendant, is identified, he's wearing a kind of a pink top that's very, I think you'll see through the surveillance, distinctive from what a lot of the other individuals are wearing, that makes him a little perhaps more identifiable to people as they're watching some of the surveillance video. And Officer Royston will then talk about his initial response to the scene. You'll see some body camera footage from him of just the circumstances in the aftermath of the shooting, the response for medical care for Tatiana Zek, who was on the parking lot having suffered that single wound. And you'll also hear some testimony from Aaron Matson from the Wisconsin Crime Lab. And Mr. Matson is going to testify a little bit about some of the surveillance footage from Maplewood Commons, which is going to have surveillance footage of the shooting itself and some of the movements of individuals before and after the shooting, as well as from Jesus Little Lamb, as I mentioned, that has the cameras pointing towards Tyson Middle School, and there's a camera towards the back side of that apartment where you see the individuals fleeing. And so Mr. Matson's going to talk about taking those videos and putting them in kind of a compilation where they kind of run together, where people can kind of see the different movement without having to watch what could be hours of video, and we'll have some different timestamps to show the gap in time as it's advancing forward, and a little box on there that shows the location of where Maplewood Commons and some of these locations will be. You'll also hear from Detective Mylon, who's going to testify and give you a little bit of a summary of some of the circumstances, who some of the individuals are, some of the connections between them. And then you're going to start to hear about the collection of the evidence from primarily the Fond du Lac Police Department, some of the things that I've already talked about, different bullet casings, fragments, rounds that were recovered during the investigation. And as I mentioned, you'll hear from some people from the crime lab as well on the DNA findings as well. That'll be Kelly Thomas, and then on the ballistics, it'll be Dario Garcia from the Wisconsin Crime Lab. One of the things I expect you'll hear from Mr. Garcia on the ballistics analysis of the round that was the bullet or fragment that was recovered from Tatiana Zek from her head, that they were unable to match that to any of the two firearms that were recovered because of the what would be considered the damage to the round or lack of markings on the round that was recovered. And he'll testify and talk with you a little bit about what that means and why, based on the condition of the bullet or lack of markings, it wasn't able to be matched. And so you won't hear any testimony during this trial from linking either of the two firearms that were found to the bullet that Tatiana Zek, that hit Javier, that hit Keyshawn. You won't hear any testimony because of all of the rounds. The condition of them was too damaged or lack of markings to be able to match. And so after you hear from some of the witnesses on the collection of the evidence and the crime lab, then you're going to start to hear from some of those people that were directly involved, that were witnesses to this, the individuals I mentioned that were in that group, what they saw in that hallway area, the individuals they saw that had firearms, the shooting, things of that nature. And then you're also going to hear from some other witnesses that are in that Maplewood Commons or nearby that saw some things. You'll hear from one of those witnesses who lived in that apartment right across from where the shooting happened. So the parking lot was between him and where the shooting happened. And you'll actually see in one of the videos the blinds kind of move a little bit from his apartment where he's looking out, and you're going to hear some testimony from him where he saw the individual in that pink shirt that's going to be identified as Parise Larry by other witnesses, the defendant, and seeing essentially smoke coming from a gun in his hand, and he'll tell you what he thought that meant to him, which would be close in time to where that casing was found, that third casing was found, and I believe you'll see an impact in the grass in the video that would be consistent with a bullet from that round being fired. And so that's a little bit of a summary of the evidence that you're going to hear in this trial. And as I mentioned earlier, what I expect you're going to hear from some of these witnesses is that Keyshawn Johnson was the intended target of the shooting, and that Tatiana Zek ultimately was the one that had the bullet strike her in the head. You're going to hear from another doctor that performed was a physician at St. Agnes Hospital that had treatment for Keyshawn Johnson and Javier and is aware of some of the injuries that they suffered as well. And you'll hear from Javier, you'll hear from Emmanuel, and I expect you'll hear from Keyshawn during this trial as well. And so, like I said earlier, I'm not arguing to you about what this evidence means. I'm simply giving you an idea of some of the evidence you're going to hear, the general order of what we expect that might be. And then once the trial evidence portion is done, then you'll get to hear from the attorneys again, where I will be giving a closing argument, the defense will give a closing argument, and then because the state has the burden of proof, then I'll have that second opportunity to come before you in rebuttal. And what I'm going to be asking you to do at that phase of the trial is find the defendant, Parise Larry, guilty as a party to a crime to all of the charges that the judge read to you. Party to a crime to first-degree intentional homicide, party to a crime, attempted homicide, party to a crime on the reckless injury, party to a crime on the reckless endangering safety, party to a crime on the negligent operation, and the illegal possession of a firearm by the defendant being under 18 years old. Thank you.
The prosecution says that surveillance footage shows Antonio pushing open the hallway door with a weapon at his side, stepping into view of the group outside. Within seconds, shots rang out. The state alleges that Antonio first, and Parise Larry began firing almost immediately afterward. Several people were struck in different parts of the complex. Tatiana collapsed in the parking lot. Javier, inside his apartment, was hit by a round that came through the building. His son felt heat or a grazing sensation, but did not require medical care. Kashan was also hit and later sought treatment. Prosecutors emphasized that Kashan fired only one shot back in response, while the majority of the shots fired came from the hallway where the boys had been standing. Immediately after the shots, cameras from a nearby center captured the boys fleeing behind the apartment complex toward the back side of Tyson Middle School. When officers searched the area, they found a garbage can containing 2 weapons. Forensic testing showed that a Glock found inside contained DNA matching Antonio and was tied to 10 of the casings recovered at the scene. Another weapon also found in the same garbage can carried DNA matching Parise Larry and was tied to 3 additional casings discovered both in the hallway and along the escape route behind the complex. In the days that followed, police pieced together the suspect's movements, using hours of surveillance footage from the apartment buildings and the center. One resident who lived across from the courtyard later reported seeing a person in a distinctive pink shirt, clothing that surveillance shows Larry wearing, holding what looked like a firearm with a burst of smoke appearing near the barrel. Within days of the shooting, Larry turned himself in to law enforcement. Antonio fled but was arrested months later in Chicago. Over the next 2 years, the case moved through the courts. Antonio eventually pleaded guilty in early 2025 to first-degree intentional homicide and other charges relating to the shooting. Parise Larry Jr., meanwhile, went to trial in October 2025. During the trial, jurors heard from residents, medical personnel, surveillance analysts, and crime lab specialists. They reviewed video footage mapping out the boys' movements, examined DNA results linking each defendant to his respective firearm, and listened to witnesses describe the scene and the suddenness of the violence. A crucial witness, neighbor Angela Reyes, testified that she looked outside during the incident and saw Parise Larry running across the complex and firing 2 shots toward the parking lot before disappearing behind the buildings. She told jurors that 5 to 10 minutes later, Larry called her asking for a ride and said, "Come pick me up, I did something bad."
And what did you see as you were looking outside your patio door as you moved the curtain?
Everyone was freaking out, and the boys were running across the road.
And when you say the boys were running across the road, what did you recognize any of them?
Yeah,
And who did you recognize?
Parise and Antonio.
And did you see any, specifically to the defendant, any type of clothing that he was wearing on his top?
A bright hoodie, I'm pretty sure.
And do you recall the exact color as you sit here today?
No.
And did you see, specifically to the defendant, Parise Larry, did you see anything in his hands?
Yeah.
And what did you see in his hands?
A gun.
And what did you see the defendant doing with?
He was running, and I'm pretty sure he let off 2 fires, but I could be wrong, I don't know.
And why do you, when you say 2 fires, can you explain what you mean?
2 shots.
Fired the twice?
Yep.
And could you come down on Exhibit 2? Well, let me ask you this before you do that. Does Exhibit 2 reflect the area where you saw the defendant with the gun in his hand, where you believed he fired twice?
Yeah.
Could you come down and point that out for the jury, please?
It was like in this area over here.
So you're pointing, you can grab a seat again. We've got the two buildings that are on the upper close to Pioneer Road, and you were pointing to the grass area between those two buildings?
Can you repeat that?
Yes, sorry. There's on Exhibit 2, you can see where Pioneer Road is at the top of the
Yep.
image.
Yep.
And there's two buildings directly underneath that in white.
Yep.
And then between those two buildings, you were pointing to the grassy area?
Yep.
After seeing, and let me come back to, you believe that the defendant fired the gun twice. Why did you believe that he fired the gun twice?
Because I heard like it sounded like firecrackers again.
As you were looking?
Watch it, yeah.
And after seeing that, what did you do?
I stepped outside to see what was going on.
And did you make any phone calls?
Yes.
And who did you call?
His mother.
And when you say his mother, who are you referring to?
Pyrese's mother, Carrie.
And I don't want to get into what Carrie said right now, but what were you telling Carrie?
Just everything that was going on.
And without, again, getting into what she said, was she responding to you?
Yeah.
And what was the tone of her voice?
Worried.
And when you say worried, can you be any more specific?
She was just worried and scared and trying to figure out what happened, what her son got into.
And then when you saw the defendant with the gun with Antonio, you said you saw them running?
Yep.
And where did you see them running to?
Across the road.
And can you come down again on Exhibit 2 and point out the area you saw them running across? And so you're pointing almost directly above the area in the grass that you pointed to before? Yep. And that was Pioneer Road that you showed them running across? You can grab a seat again, thank you.
And Ms. Reyes, one thing that helps my court reporter is she types down everything that we say, and in ordinary conversation, we tend to kind of just talk back and forth, but if we can try to wait until Attorney Tony's done talking, then you can answer, and I ask Attorney Tony to try to wait until you're done, until he asks another question, okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
And did you have any communication with the defendant, Parise Larry, after the shooting that same day?
Yes.
And when was that communication?
After they were already gone.
Do you Sorry, go ahead.
After they were already gone and across where I couldn't see him anymore.
And would you be able to estimate how long after that communication would have been?
Maybe 5-10 minutes.
And what was what type of communication did you have with the defendant?
He asked if I could pick him and Antonio up.
And how did he make that request? What means did he do it through?
What do you mean?
How were you physically with him? How did you?
No, he called me. I was in my apartment still.
And what exactly did the defendant say to you?
I just asked if I could pick him up.
And did you?
No.
Why not?
Because I had my kids. And I told him whatever happened, I don't want nothing to do with it.
And did the defendant tell you why he wanted you to pick him up?
No.
And you remember talking with Detective Milan about what you saw and heard that day after the shooting?
Yes.
And would it refresh your memory to see a report that Detective Milan did summarizing that?
Sure.
Angela, I'm bringing up Exhibit 63. It's a one-page document, front and back. The page I'm going to show you, the upper, is page 97 of 103. And what I want you to do is just look at this very top portion that's got the pink highlighting. Silently read that to yourself, please, and let us know when you're finished. I see you're looking up. I'm going to come take that exhibit back, which I now have, thank you. And having reviewed that, did it refresh your memory?
Yes.
And what did the defendant say?
Come pick me up, I did something bad.
And I think the final question I have for you, have you ever been, well, two questions. Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes.
How many times?
1.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Attorney Jensen.
On October 17, 2025, the jury found Paris Larry Jr. guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as a party to a crime, attempted first-degree intentional homicide, first-degree reckless injury, multiple counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety, and possession of a firearm as a minor. He was acquitted on 1 count involving negligent weapon use. His sentencing is scheduled for December 19, 2025, where he faces the possibility of life in prison. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.